All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so thrilled, we're so excited. And the Muhammad Ali Center is incredibly proud to host this important and timely conversation this morning. I want to begin by sincerely thanking all of our panelists. We've been overwhelmed by your generosity for sharing your time with us today. Thank you so much. And I also want to thank all of our partners on this project, most particularly Dr. Mary Hums, Matt Meyerson, who's hosting, or one of our co-hosts today, and then of course Eli Wolf, who has been a stalwart champion of this program and a great friend of the Ali Center for many, many years. So thank you all so much. At the Muhammad Ali Center, we share Muhammad's legacy through his 6 core principles, the values that guided Muhammad throughout his life: confidence, conviction, dedication, giving, respect, and spirituality. And the mission of the Muhammad Ali Center is to share and preserve the legacy and ideals of Muhammad Ali, to promote respect, hope, and understanding, and to inspire people everywhere to be as great as they can be. I fundamentally believe that those core principles and our mission are a call to action, because to live out the legacy of Muhammad Ali is to understand that because we've all been gifted this life, we have a responsibility to figure out how we are going to give back, to do something to help someone else, to figure out how each and every one of us can make the world just a little bit better in whatever corner of the earth that we occupy. Because Muhammad, as we all know, used every ounce of being, every ounce of his celebrity, of his platform as an athlete, as a champion, to give back, to speak truth to power, to advocate for justice and for liberation and for equality and for peace. And Muhammad was also an incredible mentor. He mentored so many people through his example, through his core principles. And I think he continues to inspire generations. Well, let me conclude on this thought. On June 3rd of this year, which of course is the anniversary of Muhammad's passing, the center shared an open letter written by Mrs. Lonnie Ali, where she reflected on this incredible time in our history and stated, and of course I'm paraphrasing, "The world still needs Muhammad Ali's voice." The world still needs Muhammad Ali's voice. And I think we would all agree, and I've certainly felt that, especially throughout the last few months. But I have to say, as I have watched and witnessed our city, Muhammad's hometown, join together with communities from around our nation, communities from around our world, really, to advocate and to call for justice and reform in the names of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Elijah McClain and fellow Louisvillians, Breonna Taylor and David McCaddy and too many others. I have felt quite certain in that beautiful belief and ferocious belief that the world can be better. I have felt quite certain that Muhammad's core principles and Muhammad's legacy and Muhammad's voice are very much still with us. So on that note, I will conclude by saying I am just so very grateful to be here today. I am so inspired by this conversation. I am inspired to be able to learn from the wisdom of these incredible legends who are with us today. And I am quite certain that we are all going to leave here inspired and motivated to take action, to be a mentor, to go out and figure out how we can all find our greatness in service to others. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Erin. I will be very brief and do my job of getting this over to Doug to start the conversation. But my name is Matt Meyerson. I'm honored to serve as Senior Director of External Affairs at Mentor. I'm really honored to be with you all today as we discuss the power of mentorship and activism. Potential is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. We all know that a major driver of healthy development and opportunity is who you know and who's in your corner. 30 years ago, Mentor was founded to expand that opportunity for young people by creating a mentoring field and a movement. Over the last 30 years, we've seen a 10-time increase in young people who get to benefit from structured mentoring relationships, from a few 100,000 to millions. While we're very proud of this progress, we also know that without a doubt, we have a long uphill climb ahead if we're going to better serve our young people in the next generation. Systemic inequality, structural racism, and oppression manifest in so many ways across our society. For many young people, inequality shows up as a gap in opportunity, a gap of networks, and a gap of access to adult relationships outside of their immediate family. Mentoring is a thing that unites us. It's a key response to these issues, and we know that relationships are powerful tools. They bring us together, navigate us to greater connection and opportunity. For me personally, I know that my privilege sits at the forefront of my experience. Here I am today as a white, able-bodied, heterosexual man who didn't grow up in poverty. I also grew up with access to so many adults who had the luxury of time to focus on me and my development. Unfortunately, my access to caring adults beyond my family is not the norm for many young people across our country and our world. This difference is the mentoring gap, and that's what we're aiming to close. Okay, enough about Mentor, enough about me. I'm honored to serve as your co-host today, along with Doug Glanville. He's not only a professor at University of Connecticut, an ESPN analyst, he's also a former Major League Baseball player with the Cubs, Phillies, and Rangers. He's an accomplished writer. If you haven't yet, definitely check out his most recent piece from ESPN's The Undefeated that explores race and identity in America. Before I pass to Doug to moderate our discussion, I want to quickly introduce each of our amazing athletes. Have to start with Laila Ali, undefeated four-time world champion boxer, amazing 24-0 record, one of the most successful boxers in history. She's also the daughter of renowned boxing legend Muhammad Ali, the namesake of today's event and so many other things that have been good in our history. She's a past president of the Women's Sports Foundation, an advocate for women's equality through sports. I'm going to go through the rest of our panelists one by one right now. Issan Thomas is the NBA veteran turned author, motivational speaker, and co-host who's been committed to civic engagement and social justice throughout his career. His writings appeared in The Guardian, The Washington Post, CNN, ESPN, and his latest book is appropriately titled We Matter, Athletes and Activism. It perfectly aligns with today's conversation. Hal Gasol is an NBA and Spanish national team legend. He's a six-time NBA All-Star, holds 3 Olympic medals, and also led Spain to the gold medal in the 2006 FIBA World Cup, where he was named MVP. In 2013, he helped found the Gasol Foundation that works to reduce childhood obesity. And in 2019, he was named Global Champion for Nutrition and Zero Childhood Obesity by UNICEF. Next, Aeneas Williams, 14-year NFL veteran that played with the Arizona Cardinals and St. Louis Rams. In 2014, he was inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame and continues to stay involved with teams across the league through his Reaching Your Potential lecture series. Oh, and if that's not enough for you, he's also the founding pastor at Spirit Church in St. Louis. Next, we have Jason Collins, a Stanford alum, 13-year NBA veteran, and the first active NBA player to come out as gay in any of the 4 major U.S. men's professional sports leagues. He's been a leader and advocate for LGBTQ+ rights and equality. And no big deal here, but in 2014, Jason was on the cover of Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People. Next, we have Devin and Jason McCourty, NFL players from New England Patriots. They became the first ever set of twins to win the Super Bowl together. They co-host an amazing podcast called Double Coverage. Recently, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, the McCourty twins donated $90,000 worth of Chromebooks for students in their hometown of Rockland County. Fittingly, they were 2020 nominees for the Muhammad Ali Sports Humanitarian Award. And it continues. Our final panelist, Billy Bean, is an MLB veteran, author, and social equity and inclusion leader. Billy is the only openly gay former MLB player alive today. He is currently Major League Baseball's vice president and special assistant to the commissioner, and previously held positions as Major League Baseball's first ambassador for inclusion and vice president of social responsibility and inclusion. Thank you to each of us for joining us today. I'm gonna do a couple of quick logistical notes and then have the opportunity to pass the mic. The Q&A feature is live for all attendees. We will aim to leave time at the end of this conversation to answer some questions from the audience. And at 12:30 p.m., our attendees will rotate. This group will rotate out, and we have an amazing group of Olympians who will be joining us on our second panel from 12:30 to 1:30. I want to conclude with a quote that is truly one of my favorites, and it's from former President Obama that he gave during a State of the Union address. Each of us is only here because somebody, somewhere, stood up for us. I encourage you to keep this quote in the back of your minds throughout today's conversation. Doug, please take us away.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. It's a great honor to be here. We recognize that through these core principles of Muhammad Ali, we find the power of mentorship. We see how it flows through that we had that somebody in our life at the right time to be able to share something significant that changed the trajectory and our commitment to social activism, to justice, and to our profession in sport. And so through that, of course, I would like to start off with referencing Layla Ali. Of course, when we talk about the Muhammad Ali Center and that legacy, I first want to ask her, what does it mean to have this sort of collection of athletes, not just in this moment, but really worldwide, engaging now and not sticking to sports to try to improve our society?
Well, I think it's amazing. I mean, we have such a big platform in order to make a change. So many of us have our own fan base. We have, the opportunity to use social media, to use the media for good. And I think that, it's everyone's responsibility to do. I think as individuals, obviously we're athletes or celebrities or whatever you want to call it, so we have more eyes on us, but I'm always telling everybody, whether you're famous or not, each human being has a responsibility to try to leave this world in a better place. So there's so many different causes that you can get involved with. I'm one for picking a cause that is authentic to you or that you're passionate about, because the things that I work on, even when nobody's looking, that I want to, do is because I don't feel like it's work. It's something that really clicks with me naturally. So that's what I always encourage everyone to do. But of course, my father has been a great example of how much of a difference one person can make. He was just a young boy from Louisville, Kentucky, who believed in himself. And then throughout his life, he was faced with all these different challenges, and he wasn't afraid to have courage and stand up for what he believed in. It's that simple. It wasn't like this big organized mission, he didn't have all these different people behind him. It's just he did what was in his heart. And that's why so many people look up to him, because unfortunately, many of us don't have that type of courage. But it's definitely an inspiration to all.
And I want to, in that vein, Layla, I want to take a minute to pose to you, if you look at your life and sort of as a young woman, who is that mentor in your life outside of your family? I know that your family has such a tremendous legacy, but outside of your family, who is that person? And we could take this opportunity to even address them directly, but who would be that person that you would say was the biggest influence from a mentorship?
You mean growing up?
Growing up and along the way.
Yeah. The thing is that unfortunately I didn't have any mentors growing up. I didn't have that one person, that kind of was like, listen, Layla, this is how it's done. Somebody that I could go to and that I could trust to show me the ropes. And that's one of the reasons why I feel it's so important now, myself, because I know what I didn't experience. That's one of the reasons I became one of the past presidents of the Women's Sports Foundation. I remember when Billie Jean King first asked me to do it, I was like, no, because I didn't play organized sports growing up. It wasn't until I became a boxer that I realized I was even an athlete. I saw women's boxing on television, wanted to do it. And then I went and, learned how myself. So I thought to myself, well, how am I going to be the president of this organization when I don't have the experience that a lot of these athletes do? A lot of you played in high school or college, had that experience, and I didn't. But then she said, no, that's exactly why I want you to do it, because you know exactly why it's so important for girls to have sports, because you didn't have that opportunity. It's a big regret of mine. So the same with everything else. It's like I didn't have a mentor growing up, and I always wish that I did. So now I don't want other people to have that experience, for themselves.
Yeah, and let me pose this question to the rest of the panelists. Let's just go around the Zoom, I guess we would say. How about Aeneas Williams? I mean, who was that person, that mentor that sort of shaped sort of your future within this activism space and also through sport?
Well, just as you said, where it's not someone in the house, because immediately dad and mom, my dad being the first college graduate on both sides of the family. But the first person was the guy who supervised Harrell Park, which was a little league park that was really a safe haven in the 17th Ward in Holly Grove in New Orleans. It's the park where Odell Beckham played, I played, Leonard Fournette, Lil Wayne wrote his lyrics in the stands while watching athletes play. And what Coach Mims, his name is Coach Mims, the late Coach Mims, what he did, he made the park a safe haven. Even though there was drugs all around, fighting, guns all around, he did not allow it to come into the park. So one of the things that he did, and it wasn't so much mentoring me every day, I'll never forget, I got mad at someone. I had a knife in my pocket, and I was going to get even with this person because they were bigger than me. He ended up seeing the knife, he takes it from me, lets my parents know, and was able to deter possibly a decision happening in my life that would have possibly changed my life. So shout out to Coach Mims and that safe haven that Harrell Park was for all of us.
Yeah, Jason Collins, how about yourself? Someone outside of your family that served as a very influential mentor in your life?
Well, someone like that for me was my English teacher, Joni Parker. I guess I was looking for someone who wasn't in the world of sports to sort of ask questions to. I knew that I was gay, but I didn't want to accept it. But I think she had a subtle way of also knowing, but not really forcing me out of the closet. And she just opened my eyes to the world. This is back in the 90s where LGBT studies just wasn't offered. But she did introduce me to some writers from the LGBTQ community. She just opened my eyes to a world outside of sports. And my parents always impressed upon me the importance of seeing a bigger picture, and that when we would travel to different basketball games, not just see the inside of different arenas, but venture out into the world, venture out into each city, community. And I think my mentor, Joni Parker, allowed me also to see a bigger picture, a bigger part of the world. Unfortunately, she passed this last fall, but she was just an incredible human being.
Yeah, and Pau, I know you've have such a large connection in health and the medical community with your family. Who was that mentor outside of your family that was inspirational for you?
Well, at first, I guess I look for mentors in books. I look for inspiration, and I always believe that you have a chance to learn from people, no matter who you encounter. You just got to pay attention and listen. So I had the chance and the opportunity to have a lot of mentors, also what I call coaches, throughout my career growing up as a basketball player, and I try to learn from each and every coach to get better, to grow as a basketball player, but also as a person. So one of my mentors that I always, it's one of my idols and reference was Nelson Mandela. And I always try to look for those examples of inspiration and great humans in the history that put, I guess, sacrifice themselves for the better of humanity. And so I've learned how through hardship he took advantage of hardship and just trying to maximize opportunities, learn and envisioned how he could change the world and change the history of his country. So Nelson was, if I have a son one day, one of my favorite names for him to be named is Nelson. So he's one of my biggest mentors, even though I haven't had a chance to meet him. But he inspired me to do a lot of work in Africa, and I've been to Africa on many occasions. Actually, my first trip with UNICEF in 2005 was to South Africa to help the children and bring awareness there and give them a voice of what was going on and what's going on in many countries, but in South Africa particularly. And then as I went along, Phil Jackson has been a huge mentor for me. He's incorporated a lot in my life, with the Zen master approach and providing me with balance in my life and perspective. Kobe Bryant, also a great mentor to me, a brother that I lost this year in a very painful way, but I learned a lot from him too, and I could always reach out to him, and when we got together, he shared a lot of knowledge. Again, it's important to put yourself out there and reach out to people that you can learn from, and I think you can learn from anyone. Obviously, with great figures and great names, probably there's more knowledge there, but it's something that I like to do, and I do constantly.
Yeah, and we've discovered already that we hear mentorship flow through even its absence. We've seen it from a redirection of choices that we're making. We've seen it through education. We've seen it through coaching, and even someone that you may not have direct access has that inspirational power. So Etan, what is your story? I know you have a Tulsa history, and I know you've written quite a bit to express some of your moments of change. But who would be that person outside of your family?
Well, first, my first mentor was Malcolm X. I read the autobiography of Malcolm X when I was in the 7th grade, and that kind of changed everything for me. Just opened my eyes to the world. Then I just had this thirst for knowledge and wanted to keep reading more and more about my history and my culture. And then so my mentor became my AAU coach, who's also my pastor of my church, the church that I went to, Antioch Baptist Church, Reverend Potter. And he really sat down with me, and we would, he used basketball he was teaching us the game, but also he was teaching us about life. And that was really more what it was for. And so I would bounce questions off him and talk to him about different things and stuff. And it's funny because now I'm an AAU coach. I coach my son's team, and I do the same thing with my guys. I mean, basketball is just one part of it, but then we're learning about everything that's going on right now. They're asking me questions, and young people need that. I know I needed it. Because I had this new knowledge, but I needed guidance with it, and I needed direction with it. So, I read one book, and then, okay, direct me to the next book that I need to read, and the next book that I need to go and research, and then talk me through this and walk me through this. And I think right now, looking at the young people right now, they need guidance as well. I can't, stress enough of how important mentors are. I mean, I had the honor of interviewing Layla Ali for my book, and also interviewing Ilyasha Shabazz for my book. And, they talked about the importance of Muhammad Ali being mentored by Malcolm X. And it's so interesting because, that mentorship can change a person's entire life. You give them a newfound appreciation of who they are, and especially with athletes, because you have this newfound, of the history of where you are. Because then you start learning about Bill Russell and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and John Carlos and Tommy Smith, and how different athletes use their positions and platforms. And for me, it all started with the mentor from my pastor and AAU coach.
And it's powerful. You think about mentorship also has this timeline, this ability to connect the past with someone who's had experience and perspective and sort of share it. And as we're dissecting this today, we're looking at how do we move this forward, and what are those next steps to kind of preserve lineage. Let's turn to the McCourty. I feel like I'm double teamed here, so I'm not going into your coverage here. But how about the McCourty, a fellow Jersey history there?
Yeah, Jason here for people who maybe can't tell who's who. But for me, it's been ever changing. Growing up, having so many different coaches, like Pal said, that had the opportunity to pour into our lives. But it's also been teachers. I remember in the 5th grade having a teacher, a Black teacher, Mrs. Barnes, and she was willing to keep kids after class to teach them and then willing to drive them home. And in the 8th grade, having a teacher, Mr. Bennett, who made kids go home and get their homework signed by their parents and actually cared about what each and every student was going through at home. And it was kind of those small gestures just growing up that kind of imprinted on me to just think about how much you can care about others that are around you. And it just felt that as I continue to go on, the more coaches that I've talked to, the more players, because when you get into professional league, having older guys to pour into you has been huge for me. When I first got to Tennessee playing for the Titans, I had a few guys that were willing to just talk to me about whether it was charity, whether it was about learning how to be a pro, just different things throughout life that has been a huge part as I've continued to grow and continue to try to chase after things, not only on the field, but off the field as well. Yeah, and I'll just piggyback off him real fast. I just remember a quick story of being down at the rookie symposium, probably my 3rd year, his 4th year. We're panelists, and Aeneas Williams is there and Hardy Nickerson, 2 guys who had 10 plus years in the NFL, great players. And they stayed up to 3 o'clock in the morning talking to myself and me and Jay and Torrey Smith about family, about being husbands, fathers, about actually playing football, just everything that could come up. They really poured into us what they went through, different hardships, different things that they enjoyed. And I remember sitting there, and I remember Aeneas said to me, he was like, "Do you have good conversation with Bill Belichick? Do you go and talk to him?" And I looked at him like, "No, like he's Bill Belichick, no way." And he was like, "Why?" He's a wealth of knowledge. He knows so much. He's been in this league. And I remember walking away, and every day since I've been in New England, now going on 11 years, I've thought about that, and I think about how much I talk to him now, how much I've learned. Really started from hearing a guy that I knew and looked up to, and hear him just speak facts to me was big for my development as a man and as an NFL player.
Yeah, and I know both of you gentlemen were scholarship recipients to Rutgers, and you both expressed such a passion for education, how that was part of that legacy. So Billy, with MLB, I know we've crossed paths many times through baseball. What's your story of that mentor outside of your family that shaped your life?
Well, Doug, I think a little different from the rest of the amazing panelists here is that I let my personal journey with my sexual orientation really affect my career. And I lost a partner who died of HIV-related causes while I was living in the closet in 1995. And as Jason said earlier, there just was no education or commentary about acceptance and inclusion in those days. And I just felt like someone like me did not belong in baseball. And I believed all the stereotypes I grew up with. I grew up in a really conservative family. My dad was in the Marine Corps. And it wasn't until I had been out of baseball probably 3 years, 2.5, 3 years, that I, by accident, met Judy Shepard, the mother of Matthew Shepard, at an event that an organization that asked me to come many, many times. And I was afraid to say yes, because I only saw the part of me that was lied to my friends and my family and the people that loved me and that I loved about my truth, because I thought I would be rejected. And I remember sitting next to Judy, and it was just about a year after her son was brutally murdered in Laramie, Wyoming. And she had become an advocate for change because of the loss of a child, and thrown into some very heavy conversations that were subjected to bias and bigotry for those just being connected to the LGBTQ plus community. And I couldn't even really look her in the eye. And I just told her, I don't know what to say to someone like you. I'm not an expert at anything. There was no role models in sports in my community at that time, very, very few. And she just looked at me and held both of my hands and said, you just have to be yourself and tell the truth, be available. And it was really like an intersection, life-changing moment for me, where I started to allow myself to meet people in my own community, people like this, you know, where shining a light on my life allowed me to meet amazing people who were agents of change and trying to make the world a more fair and equitable place. And just that simple willingness to be my best self and follow just a simple advice of an amazing woman really galvanized me and allowed me to put myself into the conversation and try to make the world a more accepting and inclusive place.
Yeah, and thinking, looking at Jason Collins' work, I remember reading, I think you cited Megan Rapinoe about being in the closet and feeling like it's all consuming because it seems like that's all your identity, and then actually coming out and saying, oh, this is just a part of me. And I think part of what we're expressing here with Muhammad Ali is, you know, his global reach, right? This global power of influence, and within that global family are so many different identities. So I want to throw it open to the panel about Muhammad Ali's legacy directly impacting you at different stages or moments that you'd like to share with our audience. I guess I could start with Layla, which, is there a moment directly with your father or something that he did that you maybe even seen later in life that really crystallized this sense of global and tying together through mentorship?
My father used to remind us on a regular basis when we were little how famous he was. He would come down and say, do you realize that I can go anywhere in the world, anywhere? And they don't have to have television. They don't have to have, you know, radio. People know the name Muhammad Ali. We're like, yes, Dad, yes, Dad. But as a kid, I didn't understand why he was so famous. You know, everywhere we went, we would get stopped. We'd be held up for hours. But my dad loved people, you know, and connected with them and always took the time to put a smile on everyone's face, you know? So that's one thing that I noticed about my father growing up. He was famous, people were bowing down to him, but he looked at himself as just any other man. And he made us feel like, you know, we had that same greatness within us as well. And I think that that's something that people connect with. But I mean, I can go to the Ali Center and still be amazed at my own father and seeing the timelines and all of the changes that he made and how many people he impacted, you know, that are up on the wall, from freeing hostages, you know what I mean, for putting everything on the line for his beliefs. And I think there's just so much there that, you know, I'm still learning something new all the time. And I'm always just like, wow, how can this one man have done so much and touched so many lives? So many people come up to me and say, oh, I met your father here or there. And I'm like, wow, he really touched so many people. And no matter where I go, no matter what their socioeconomic status is or the race or the religion is, people love Muhammad Ali for those core reasons, you know, because he stood for equality for all, basically. And that's how he felt. And we saw over time, you know, the things that he would say and how he would express himself change as he learned more, as they should. You know, because like he said, who you were at 20, you shouldn't be that same person as you are at 40. But as long as you're moving in the right direction and you're learning, you know, but he you know, like I said, I'm just still in awe of my own father, and inspires me every day.
And within that global sensibility, I mean, Pao, you've played internationally, you've mastered multiple languages. I mean, what has that done to shape mentorship and your ability to reside in so many different arenas to share these ideas of passing things on?
First of all, I just want to say, you know, Muhammad Ali is also a big source of inspiration and to me, and how he fought for what he believed in, and how he was not scared to share his views and be uncomfortable and pay the price to disrupt, which I think is a big moment that we find ourselves in, and also how he utilized his platform in order to do that, in order to push those principles and those values. I remember actually meeting for the first time Muhammad in Singapore in 2005 for an Olympic bid. I was part of the Madrid 2012 Olympic bid, and I think Muhammad Ali came to support the Chicago Olympic bid at that time. And I was very impressed to meet him briefly, but he was so supportive, and he believed the power of sports to be able to change things, and how he was there and took the time. Singapore is not, nearby. It's not like, taking a drive here and there. And he showed, his commitment even at that point. It was just inspiring. And as a 25-year-old that I was at the time, I couldn't really grasp it. But as you move forward in life, you really start to understand things and the value and the importance and the power of actions. That's what I try to do now. Try to utilize my platform, try to join efforts, try to speak out, try to learn the importance of learning as much as you can, so you can have an educated opinion, and not be afraid to reach out, not be afraid to reach out to people that you can learn from. I talked recently to George Straveling, a coach that I think has had tremendous impact in the world of basketball, but in the world of sports. And he truly emphasizes the importance of education. He's like, George, if you could tell me something that I could relate to my basketball peers, brothers, because I'm part of the NBPA, the Players Association, say, what can I tell them? It's like, emphasize the importance of education. Read, educate yourself, just learn as much as you can. Don't underestimate the power of knowledge, the power of reading. This is something that he truly emphasizes, and I was like, absolutely, I will relate that. And that's a big part for players to understand going forward, and especially in times like this, where we can really have a chance to make a big difference and move the needle and change things for the better.
Yeah, and Aeneas, I think one through line when you think about Muhammad Ali's legacy is his faith. And you founded a church, and maybe you could talk about how a moment in Ferguson started to really shift your purpose in life, and through that commitment.
Well, first, shout out to Layla carrying on her dad's legacy. And when when you bring up Ferguson, you bring up what's happening now, the one thing that has inspired me with Muhammad Ali, it was the power of his words. It was his ability to communicate and articulate in such a way, not only getting educated and informed about what he said, but how he says it. Who tells another person, I'm pretty, right? Who says that, right? Other than somebody who understands during that time, African Americans were not valued. And then as I've read even more as to why he said some of these things and how intentional he was. So when it comes down to faith, even just starts with the Bible. If you just go to Genesis, it says, and God said. So evidently, words are powerful. And Muhammad Ali taught me to use my words intentionally to help bring awareness, but also use those same words to help bring change and healing.
Yeah, and I'd like to take an opportunity. I know everyone on this panel has been engaged in doing so much through that legacy, through the spirit of these core principles and beyond. If you could take time to share something that's close and near and dear to you that you're working on in the spirit of mentorship that you're hoping to pass on during this time. So why don't I start with Billy Bean? I know you're doing many programs at MLB to inclusion, diversity, and you're really the highest ranking former player, right, with the commissioner's ear. So maybe you can speak to that.
Well, we started, it's interesting, my return to baseball in 2014, where we were then and where we are now. And we started a few years ago a diversity fellowship program, which really tried to take a good hard look at why we were losing these amazing candidates of color, men and women, from the executive side. And providing an opportunity for careers in baseball. And the structure there was we learned a lot, definitely, where a lot of people like, the entertainment business or radio or movies or, are willing to do anything to get their foot in the door. And we were losing tremendous candidates to corporate America. And for us, I think that we've been able to turn that around, incentivize clubs, and understand, that for us to reach the broadest market, to have the best product, to be a diverse and inclusive workplace, we have to do whatever we can to find those candidates and bring them to us, not wait for them to knock on our door. And the one, things take time to change. Obviously, this moment that we're in, an amazing cultural shift, a tipping point where the images that we can no longer tolerate at any level finally have galvanized and unified all demographics to understand, the way systemic racism has alienated so many of our brothers and sisters that were even our greatest heroes. And you're in my game, something that painful history. But we are in baseball right now. The opportunity is our commissioner and the people that I work with and around understand that we need to be a part of the solution. And I really am excited about the opportunities that are ahead of us. It's taken a long time to overcome what may have been ignored or distanced in the past. But we're looking forward to some really, really important education programming and benefits, seeing the benefits of that.
And Issan, how about yourself? I know you've taken time for almost learning through expression, writing poetry, literary, reading. What's been some examples of sort of that close way you're trying to pass on mentorship?
Well, with my book, We Matter Athletes and Activism, I really wanted to use that to be able to encourage younger athletes to continue using their voice. I wanted to show all of these athletes who I had the honor of being able to interview and really use what their trials, their tribulations, their struggles, the reactions of the media, the reactions of fans and everybody like that, and the power of their voice. It's interesting because just this morning, I sent a text to Steven Jackson and told him, hey, keep doing the work that you're doing. Don't let anybody cancel you, keep going. And he responded, he said, I will. But it's something that I learned when I was younger. And so your question before, I had my, Muhammad Ali moment, I guess, when I was in high school. And I had a situation where I was stopped by the police. I was driving to my game. It was a big game against our biggest rivals. And it was a terrible scene. Back then in the 90s, when the police would stop you, when they stopped black men, they would have them get out the car and sit on the ground. That was just kind of routine. And so they thought that they had seen me from a mugshot, but I looked familiar to them because I played basketball and I was in the papers. But that was after 45 minutes of me being on the ground. One person had his hand on his gun, 3 police cars came and everything like that. So I was upset. So after that, I was also in speech and debate. So while we were, winning state championships in high school, we was also winning state championships in speech and debate. So I wrote a speech about it. And, I started performing it everywhere and it started getting a lot of attention. So, the Tulsa World wrote an article about it. I got a letter from the Tulsa Police Department saying that they were going to look into the situation. Different people around were complimenting me and saying, thanks for using your voice and things like that. And then I had other people who were really upset that I criticized the police. So then going back to mentorship, then I started talking to my grandfather. And he said, well, now, you're reading about all of these men. You're reading about Muhammad Ali. You're reading about, all these men, Bill Russell, that stood up for something. Now you're going to see the experience, the backlash that happens when you stand up for something that a lot of people disagree with. And then he told me, he was like, well, you know, the way that everybody warmly views, and he's talking about mainstream America, you know, wraps their arms around Muhammad Ali now is not the way that he was treated in his heyday. When he was coming out, when he spoke out against the war, when he said he's not going to Vietnam, he was like public enemy number one. He's like, and if you have the courage to be able to speak out, you also have to withstand that there's going to be backlash and a lot of people who disagree with what you have to say. But as your position, especially as an athlete, this is all my grandfather telling me all this. As an athlete, you also have a tremendous platform to be able to influence a lot because your voice carries. Now, I was no Muhammad Ali, but in Tulsa, everybody knew me. You know, so when I spoke out and started talking about the police department and what they did and, you know, how they police and what's wrong with it, it got a lot of attention. So that's when I made the connection. I was like, oh, wait a minute now. I could use this basketball thing to also talk about different things that are going on. So that was kind of like my Oprah Winfrey aha moment. And so that for me was really the start of everything. So I just kind of kept going from there. So even now today, I'm trying to encourage the younger athletes, you know, because now I'm a little older, you know, but the younger athletes and the current athletes and the ones coming up in college and in high school to keep using that voice as well.
Yeah, and Devin and Jason, you know, what has been your connection? I know you both Rutgers University. I know you gave a commencement address, so that certainly. But what would you connect those dots with respect to passing on this mentorship?
Yeah, I think for us, you know, it really took over the last couple of years of joining the Players Coalition, started by Malcolm Jenkins and Anquan Bolden, and just getting a group of guys. And I think we all had passions and things that we were interested in wanting to do. But when we kind of organized, we started putting those things in, having a strategic plan. And I know this past year, being able to be in Massachusetts and being a part of a bill that advocated for $1.1 billion to go into the public school system. And myself, Jay, Matthew Slater, Deron Harmon, we went and spoke at the State House. And I remember this was coming off, you know, playing in the Super Bowl, winning the Super Bowl. And we opened it up and said how much more nervous we were sitting there speaking and testifying at the State House than even playing in that Super Bowl. So like Etan just said, understanding some of the things you would go in there and you would speak about would make some people very happy and other people upset. But I think organizing and being together in that Players Coalition, and even to this day, as new things come up and new tasks that we have, we do it together, and there's strength in numbers. So I would say that's definitely been like one of our moments of being able to branch with other guys. Yeah, and I think similar, when you talk about Muhammad Ali, like Layla said, courage. And I think about not recently, but over the last several years, really since Kaepernick took a knee and then players putting their fist up in the national anthem, I just remember going on social media and everything from, I hope you tear both ACLs, all types of things that you're getting backlash on, that people just continue to come out of the woodworks. And you could have been that guy that everybody loved. Oh, we thought you were this, we thought you were that. And it's like, as soon as you say something that someone doesn't disagree with, and I think about when you mentioned courage, the courage that is necessary to continue to do those things, regardless of what other people are saying. And I constantly look at the photo of Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Russell, and they're all sitting there, and you see a bunch of players banded together to try to change something that they see as not right. And you look at us now today, we're trying to get to that, where it's just like athletes across our world and across the U.S., hey, we can come together and be able to stand up and do things that we believe are right. And that's what's been kind of cool to see as of late, of a lot of athletes standing up, and so many great panelists on here that are doing things, whether it's race, just inequality in general, to be able to speak up and have a voice for the voiceless.
Yeah, and let me turn to Jason Collins, and I know Matt wants to take some questions from the participants. So before I do that, let me go to Jason real quick on mentorship. You've stood out on a stage of one. You made a brave and bold choice to share with the world, and facing that. What was your experience in terms of how that ended up rippling to being a mentor, being that example to set about courage?
Well, I know that I couldn't have made my decision without the people who came before me, who have also shown great courage, like Muhammad Ali. And I'm just inspired by every single person who speaks their truth. And like Atan said, usually when you do, you're met with people, with the backlash. But women in sports, with regards to coming out as members of the LGBTQ community, have been doing it for decades. And I was so inspired by Billie Jean King and Martina Navratilova. And like Billy said, sometimes you have to wait a couple years after you retire, and I didn't want to do that. But one of the cool things that, since I have stepped forward, is that becoming friends with Billy and this fraternity of athletes who all are supporting each other. And sort of now my role is, we have programs at the NBA where we speak to our players about language and try to increase their education and awareness. But then also on like a more personal level is some of the closeted athletes who are playing in professional football, NBA, Major League Baseball, reaching out to me, and just having that conversation with them and talking with them about, hey, how's everything going, and trying to build that support system, and just talk through life experiences with them. And hopefully, one day they too will step forward. But until then, it's just, supporting them and lifting them and keeping them strong. So it takes a community, and we all inspire each other, and we all make the path easier for each other. And I got to give a shout out though to my former teammate, Atan. He was, I never, when we were teammates, I don't think I ever told you just how proud I was of you for using your voice. You've always been that guy who, and sometimes when you're, like I was afraid to use my voice, but I'm so proud that, you as my teammate would always speak up, whether it was coach is tripping or whatever. You would always use your voice, so thank you. I appreciate it.
That's what's up, Jason. Appreciate that.
Well, I was full disclosure, I was a New Jersey Nets fan, so just throwing it out there. So really appreciate it. And Jason College, by the way, took more charges than anybody, by the way. So unafraid. So Matt, I figured I want to pull some questions maybe from the participants as we, we could do this for hours, so I really appreciate this, but I know for the sense of time, but Matt, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, Pal, did you want to touch on some of your activism before we pass to the audience questions? Is there anything you want to hit on? I thought I saw you started to speak up.
Oh, well, no. To me, it's just to find out what really matters to you and understanding the power that you have individually, and the power that you can have collectively with people. And there's a learning curve. So I would encourage any and everyone to kind of go into a search process of what's important to you, what you want to dedicate your life towards. And it's inspiring to see. I think that every individual in this panel understands that and has gone through that process through time. So myself, I care about children's health. I care about the children all over the world. I care about human rights. I care about people. So that's why I started being a Goodwill ambassador for UNICEF for over 15 years. I've been all over the world lately with all kinds of human emergencies and crises. And now more specifically, I dedicated myself to childhood obesity, which is one of the biggest threats to children in the world. And that's why we created the foundation with my brother Mark, and try to utilize, again, just what we're doing here, try to utilize our platform to help others to make real change. I think one of the quotes also that I like, and the phrases is by Jackie Robinson, a life is not important except and the impact that it has on other lives. And I think that that's kind of how you measure your life. That's when you get to the end of the journey, how many lives have I impacted? And that's how you know your life is truly meaningful. So I think that this is what we're all discussing here, and it's very inspiring to see just passionate people dedicating their time and their life into causes that truly matter and make a difference.
Love it. Thank you. I do want to save a few minutes for some questions that have come in from audience members. First, a question from Susan Rail. She wrote, reading seems to be a key for many of the athletes here. How do we as teachers and coaches encourage reading among our athletes who might see reading as unnecessary? Eitan, you talked about Malcolm X's book, so maybe start with you and then anyone else who wants to touch on that.
Well, I mean, I think as coaches, you have so much power with your athletes. I mean, especially from a younger age. And I don't know what age group that this coach has, but I have, we started middle school. Now they're going to high school age guys. And I talk to them all the time and recommend books for them to read and things of that nature. I mean, you have so much power with them and they listen. Some coaches, especially with AAU, you get kind of caught up in just winning. And just, because that's the way you have to keep going, you get more recognition the more that you win and the more tournaments that you win and everything like that. But the way that I approach it is the way that my coach, Reverend Potter, approached it with me. And it's just a teaching tool and preparing them for life. I mean, they're not all going to make it to the NBA. That's just not what it is. Right. But I tell them, listen, but all y'all could go to college. You know what I mean? Like all of y'all could get a basketball scholarship somewhere to college. And, and just teaching them. And I take them to panel discussions that I have. And, I had a debate at Howard University with Michael Eric Dyson and Bill Rhoden, who wrote a $40 Million Slave, and they were all right there. So I think coaches just have to use the power that they have, especially when they're younger.
Love that. I want to give a second if someone else wants to touch on that one, or I can go to the next question as well. This next question, the attendee wanted to stay anonymous, but question is for Layla in particular. Understanding this may be tough to answer, but just wondering what you think your father would have thought about the Black Lives Matter movement and the civil unrest, fight against police brutality happening all over the world right now.
I never like to speak for my father, but my father spoke a lot for himself. I mean, you can go watch a lot of footage now. I mean, people have been posting it. A lot of the same things he was complaining about and actions he was calling for and, courage he was calling upon for us to have. He said all throughout his life, especially in his younger years, and we're facing some of those same issues now with police brutality and more. So I think that so much has been said. Of course, he wouldn't want to see it. I mean, for him to have gone through it in his lifetime and then his kids, me, then his grandkids, it's just like we're all still fighting for the same thing. So in terms of the actual movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, I don't know exactly what he would think about that. You have to research movements, you have to research, the core of it, who's behind it. And, that's something that he would have to do for himself. But I think the messaging that we need to start making sure that Black lives are important. And my father, as he got older, started talking about love for all people, but that particular movement is about, people taking Black lives. So I think that was definitely very, very clear, and that's something that he would stand up for.
Fantastic. Thank you. As Doug said, we could have done this for hours. Yes, go for it.
I really want to speak about the reading part and the question that the person asked about reading. What we have to understand about reading, you incentivize young people, regardless of their age, get them to read by getting them to initially find some subjects that they like. If it's an athlete, a lot of times they like the pros of some guy in college. So have them read magazine stories about those athletes. And here's why reading is so important. Growing up in New Orleans, my schools were not very good, the public schools that I attended. I literally, at Southern University, historical Black college, I had to take a year of remedial classes. But one of the things that growing up in the house, I learned to read. And when you learn to read, it helps you overcome the deficits in maybe some of the school systems that are in somehow underserved communities. So please shout out to whoever is coaching our kids. Find ways to incentivize them with rewards. If you read a book, hey, we'll get something. But please do that. And then the second thing Devin mentioned earlier, the work that we do with the Players Coalition, along with the owners and the players that I work with the league, it has been a phenomenal work being able to collect these two partnerships and actually be intentional about the activism and very intentional about it. This has been great. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you all so much. As we transition, just want to really express appreciation to each of our professional athlete panelists from the first hour. We are going to have a very short video that came from, you will hear and recognize Doug's voice, but a really powerful video originally from Outside the Lines and then shown at the ESPYs. The video is titled Enough, but just on behalf of Mentor and the Muhammad Ali Center, and just all of the attendees today, for each of our athletes who are stepping away now, just thank you again for taking the time to be a part of this, and share your mentoring story, your stories of activism, and inspiring so many people to join in the struggle, and to find their voice. So thank you all, and we'll share a quick video and then come back for our second hour with some of our Olympic champions. And Pao, I understand and I respect you are also an Olympic champion, not just a professional athlete here. So I don't want to pigeonhole you into a box, but as we come back, we'll be coming back with the Olympic athletes.
All right. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Fantastic.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. This was fantastic.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna start it again. Apologies. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, my
It takes
apologies.
8 minutes and 20 seconds for sunlight to reach the earth. In that time, under its warm touch, the world saw George Floyd go cold under the bending knee of injustice and inhumanity. He stopped, still granted the gift to breathe, trying not to stare, but unable to look away. Then the tears flowed, and the temperature rose. The glistening streets became thoroughfares of protest until buildings burned under the recklessness of justifiable outrage and hopelessness. Nothing had changed. We had once again ignored the disinfecting power of the sun. We had silenced the voices of the people because their peaceful pleas were not made at the right time, at the right place, in the right way. We were once again told to wait. Even when Martin Luther King Jr. implored us in his letter from a Birmingham jail that wait has almost always been better. And the face of smug indifference casting its shadow with self-serving and willful ignorance, defiantly staring into the heart of the sun until we were all blinded by the hate. Staring with eyes that could see color, but not humanity. Yet the sun rose again to give us another opportunity to be enlightened, to help us see George Floyd as all of us and not just one of them. 8 minutes and 20 seconds to realize that we are still breathing when others can't. Enough time to lift a knee, enough time to say something, enough time to take a deep breath, enough time to ask why I'm calling 911, enough time to wipe a tear, enough time to be a teammate, enough time to listen, enough time to break bread, time to learn from our differences, enough time to raise a flag, time to say enough. Enough. We have had enough time to change, but too many times the light did not illuminate because we shielded our eyes from the reflection we did not want to see. We are 8 minutes and 20 seconds too late. And George Floyd is eternally non-responsive because we were non-responsive. So let's respond and make his death be our light.
Wow, I think that's the 20th time that I've seen that video, and it continues to be so powerful and so well done each time I have the opportunity to watch it. Thank you again to all the athletes from the first hour that just left. So impressed and inspired, and I am really excited for what we have in store over this next hour. Again, my name is Matt Meyerson. If you are just joining, I serve as Senior Director of External Affairs for Mentor. The question and answer feature is live for all attendees. We'll do our best to save time for some questions from the audience at the end of this session. I want to quickly introduce our amazing athletes who are joining us today, and then I will pass to my co-moderator, Doug Glanville, to really lead us throughout the next hour. First, I have to start with one of my role models in life, as someone who's spent my life thinking about the intersection of sports and activism and social justice. This man really set the stage for everything I've tried to support throughout my lifetime, and there's so many others like me. But first, Dr. John Carlos, U.S. track and field Olympian. He's a Hall of Famer, also an NFL and CFL veteran, human rights activist. He's at the center of perhaps the best known moment of sports activism of all time. In the 1968 Olympics, after he won bronze in the 200-meter dash, he raised his black glove fist during the medal ceremony to address the fight for human rights and equality. Excited to hear from you. I will go through the rest of our panelists as well, and then we'll get started. Ibtihaj Muhammad, she serves as a sports ambassador with the U.S. State Department's Empowering Women and Girls Through Sport initiative. She's an Olympian, a fencer, a medalist. She's also she's the model of the first Barbie ever to wear hijab. And in 2019, published a New York Times best-selling children's book, The Proudest Blue, a story of hijab and family. Rayson Bowden is a 2016 Olympic foil fencer. In 2019 Pan American Games, he was the gold medalist. After winning gold, Bowden knelt on the podium to call attention to protest racism, gun control, and the mistreatment of immigrants in the United States. Gwen Berry is an Olympic track and field hammer thrower. She's the indoor world record holder, 3-time national champion. Berry's also an advocate for social justice issues, most notably raised her fist during the Star-Spangled Banner at the 2019 Pan American Games to protest the injustices across America. Gwen continues to use her voice to speak out while aiming to become one of the first female hammer throwers from the U.S. to win both an Olympic and World Championship medal. Lex Gillette is a blind Paralympic athlete, the current world record holder in the long jump, a 4-time Paralympic medalist, 3-time long jump world champion, and an 18-time national champion. He is the only totally blind athlete to ever eclipse the 22-foot barrier in the long jump. A true Renaissance man, Lex is also a singer-songwriter. And in 2015, Gillette received the Athletes in Excellence Award from the Foundation for Global Sports Development. Last but not least, Dr. Edwin Moses. He's a veteran track and field athlete, activist, and leader in the development and reformation of Olympic eligibility. He's a 2-time gold medalist in the 400-meter hurdles, and he set the world record 4 times. Perhaps the most amazing stat of his athletic accomplishments, for 9 years, he remained unbeaten in the 400-meter hurdles, over 122 consecutive races. Today, Moses continues to use sports as a tool for social change and has been chairman of the Laureus World Sports Academy and the Laureus Sports for Good Foundation. So honored to have all of you join us today here with the Muhammad Ali Center, and I'll pass it to Doug to lead our conversation.
Oh, well, it's an honor to be here, and thanks for joining us in this important conversation. We've been sharing a lot of stories in previous of the professional athletes through various sports and trying to look forward, because the through line of these core principles of Muhammad Ali, and I'm going to run through them very briefly. It's confidence, conviction, dedication, respect, giving, spirituality. A through line to many of these principles comes through mentorship, learning from someone else that's sort of passed down in this legacy. And in that mentorship, we're able to look back in time and connect to that generation that is teaching us and get perspective about where we're coming from. But we also are given this power to now pass it forward and take those tools and collect people along the way. And certainly when you are seeking change, these are critical elements to being effective and making change sustainable. So I wanted to have a chance to share and open up so our audience and our viewers now have this opportunity to hear directly from those who have been on these kinds of front lines to engage. And so I want to start recognizing Muhammad Ali Center and a great thanks for the opportunity to share this. Muhammad Ali's legacy is something we'll reference in the coming hour. But first, I want to sort of go around the panel, and I'm going to start with Dr. John Carlos, but really to help people understand who was your mentor. And I want to qualify this a little bit by saying I want to keep it outside of the family, someone who was not part of your family that really shaped you and had that moment where it changed the trajectory of your future and your life. And so starting with Dr. John Carlos, I'd love to hear, given his experience and his time being an activist, who that person would be. And feel free to address them directly if they maybe listen.
Well, that's a very good question. I don't think outside of my family I can put my finger on any one particular person or situation. But I did get a mentorship from Malcolm X at about 13 years old. I had an opportunity to go down to the mosque and listen to him. I heard him on the radio a number of times. I had an opportunity to walk with him for about 1.5 years and suck up as much knowledge as I could from him. So I might say the junkies that was in my neighborhood that was shooting up every day to inquire as to why would you shoot up? What would drive you to do this thing? For them to tell me that, you know, it's a heavy thing for a black man that is in a cage and can't be the man that God might have intended for him to be, merely because of the color of his skin. You know, you can't satisfy your kids' needs. You can't be the breadwinner in the household. You can't even get your wife a rose for anniversary. And then one day you look in the mirror, man, you realize that you don't like the man in the mirror, merely because they have you in that cage and no one really understands. And they were looking for escapism. I had to learn about the fear factor, about how many of our people were afraid. And in time, I had to realize even further that we put too much emphasis on what white folks did and never put enough emphasis on what we were doing or where we need to go. And we're in this dilemma where I had a vision 52 years ago, and it actually took 52 years for society to realize that our statement wasn't about black power, blue power, green power, it was about humanity. And what you see outside today, worldwide, is just that humanity, to realize that we all need to come together. And I might want to give you guys a couple of metaphors, if I may, man. I don't want to take a whole bunch of time. But for your audience out there, man, I'd like them to take their hand and hold their hand up, just like I have my hand, and see how your hand feels like that. And then take that hand and close it into a fist. And you should be able to see the power of unity right there in a simple move just like that. And then for people of color, blacks in particular, I just turned 75 and I got a missile shoot to my brain and brought pictures to my brain again. Let me convey to you what it said to me. It asked me, it said, John, what is racism? Racism is a horrible disease of the mind, of the soul. He said, just imagine racism being placed into a big pitcher, like you had a Kool-Aid pitcher, and you standing in a big hall and you hold that pitcher out and you let it drop. When it drops, it shatters. So racism is everywhere. So when you think about the judicial system that we all have to deal with at one point or another, you say back when they established the judicial system, racism was heavily involved in it. We know where police and so forth came from when they used to chase the slaves that was trying to get away from tyranny. So you sit back and you say, well, what color is a judge's robe? Ask yourself that question. What color is that robe? You would think racism was running rampant then. You would think that the robe would be white. But no, the robe is black. Why is the robe black? Because it's the power of the universe. It's the most horrific strength in the universe. It's the most wisest in the universe, and it shows authority. That's why you have a black robe. Let's turn the page on that. And let's look at the symbols that we have in America. We have two symbols. One of them is stars and stripes. The other one's a bird. The bird is black. It's the biggest bird in the sky. It's the most powerful bird in the sky. It's the most eloquent bird in the sky. That's why they chose it, because it has that power of the universe again. But they made it a symbol because it had the white head. Let's turn the page again. Let's go to economics. They say when America is doing bad economically, they say we're in the red. Well, you sit back and you say, well, based on racism, you would think that they would leave that alone and say, well, when we're making money, we would be in the green. But once again, here we are, we're in the black when we're making money. One more time to show you the strength and the power of yourself. They put blinders on black people for the last 450 years, hiding them from who they really are. What you see out there today is that sleeping giant starting to push the leaves off and starting to rise and become aware of who he is, and recognizing that his kids have been paying more attention than we maybe thought they've been paying. I'll give you guys that just to ponder.
Yes. Oh, and in that legacy, and since we're talking with Muhammad Ali, you're talking about certain things that are passed down. Now, at its best in mentorship, we're pulling from these experiences and lessons to share and improve our circumstances, that the power of mentorship. And I think Dr. Carlos referencing that there's another kind of legacy that we're also fighting, that leads to disparity and inequality. And so let me reference Dr. Edwin Moses, who's also had this perspective over time with tremendous success in track and field. What has been your experience with mentorship, and how has it changed over time? And was there someone specific outside of your family that really sort of set the tone? Oh, I'm sorry, and just unmuting there. Oh, just to get you off mute. I think you're still on mute, Dr. Moses.
Okay, I got it.
There you
Thank
go. We got you now.
All right. Excuse me. Thanks for having me here today, and happy to go after my big brother John. I grew my beard so I could have the John Carlos look today, everyone. So I'm trying to do a great job. But when it comes to sports, 1968 was a very big year in sports. That I was 13 years old in '68, and two of the biggest things that happened to me, and it was 1967. We had a lot of civil rights problems in Dayton, Ohio, all over the country. 67, 68, 69 was a tremendous year. So in '68, of course, Dr. King was killed, Bobby Kennedy was killed, Malcolm X was killed in '75. It was just a lot of strife. So the '68 Olympics was had a huge impact on me as a 12, 13-year-old kid. And I'll never forget John Carlos and Tommy Smith. And when they did what they did in Mexico City and put the Black Power fists in the air, all the kids in the neighborhood went crazy. Now, I came from a neighborhood in Dayton, Ohio that was surrounded by projects. I lived in a little pocket because my mom and dad were both educators. And so there were a bunch of academics and doctors and lawyers in this one little clump on the side of the hill. And we had projects on every side. We had Joy Homes, we had Hilltop, and then down the street, a couple of miles away, there was another one. But one of the things and differences, and I talked to John about this, one of the differences that I see today in terms of mentorship was that, and my dad was a Tuskegee Airman. He hung around a bunch of guys who had gone to the war and World War II. So I grew up around these great Black men that had been in World War II, in the Korean War, that were college educated. Some of the few jobs they could get were as school teachers. My dad had to work at the post office and digging ditches, even when he was getting a master's degree, because he couldn't get a job in the Board of Education during that time. And I remember we used to go pick him up. My mom would take the one car that the family had. We'd go pick him up in the evening, at 11 o'clock at night from the post office, because she didn't want to leave us at home alone. But one of the things that I grew up in Dayton, to get to the story, was that in the 60s and the 70s, a lot of people are surprised to hear this, but John will tell you, in a city like Dayton, Ohio, which had a huge manufacturing capability and capacity, and a lot of Black men coming from all from the South and everything to work and work hard. Everyone that I grew up with and all the neighborhoods that I grew with, and I actually was born in the projects and then moved twice after that. But I remember that everyone in every family had a father. There was no such thing as a single family home when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s. And a lot of people are afraid to hear that. A lot of young people think that our legacy has been ghetto life and what you see depicted in these rap videos and all that. When I grew up, these guys were working at GM, and the mothers were probably secretaries because you couldn't get a job in a lot of other places. They had two family incomes. They had houses with plants, dogs, the grass was cut, the neighborhoods were clean, there wasn't any crime. And I remember one time there was one gentleman in the neighborhood that was abusing his wife. And I remember my father and a couple of other men came by and they were talking. We didn't know what was going to happen, but we knew there was going to be a fight. And they went themselves and went and put literally a beat down on this guy, and it never happened again. I mean, they put a stomp on him because that wasn't acceptable. So I come from an era where Black men were at home with their families and courageous. So I grew up around Mr. Scott, who ran the YMCA and had all the kids down there on all programs, the ones that had the baseball team and the track team, Mr. Williams at the Boy Scouts, where we were always around strong Black men that worked, had families, had houses and jobs. So I think that I'm very lucky. I hope we can get back to that point, but a lot of people do not realize that that was common and that was the way it is all over the Midwest, probably up in the East too, before the scourge of, before the Vietnam War and then the scourge of heroin, and then the crack cocaine, and then the war on drugs and war on crime, all that kicked in and decimated our community. So I'm just lucky that I grew up and had face-to-face contact and hands-on with those men to really instruct me to be the kind of guy I am. So a lot of people ask me, well, why do you do what you do? I just do what I saw my father do and these other great Black men do back in the 50s and 60s when I grew up. And I just want to let people know that that was what life was like for Black America back then. And economics, we had our own neighborhoods, we had pharmacies, doctors' offices, hardware stores, just like what you've heard about on Black Wall Street. We had a section of town like that in Dayton. So that's what I grew up seeing. And that's what I hope that we as a community are able to get back to. And what we're going through today with the strife, and the kids are raising up about the police violence. I mean, that was going on way back then too. It always has been happening forever for my entire life. So I'm glad to see that that has been the catalyst for a change. And I just, I'm optimistic like John is that these young people, as he said, they've gotten up, the line is woken, and there's going to be some significant changes. And there's a diverse group of people who have been watching it and seeing it happen. I got an email from a Jewish high school friend of mine. She told me that she's been looking at this, and she's my age. She said, being a racist is not enough anymore. She said, I feel complicit, and I have to be anti-racist now. And for the rest of my life, that's what I'm going to do. So things have changed, and for the positive.
Yeah, and I want to pose this question to everybody on the panel, and you're closing, Dr. Moses, you're talking about sort of allyship in some regards too. So let me turn to race. I mean, you've taken that protest to the stage, and later I'd like to talk a little bit about Rule 50 also. But what has been your trajectory, your path, where you've had a mentor along the line that kind of shaped your activism?
And as far as sports is concerned?
Oh yeah, well I was just referring to race and Bowdoin, so it just but yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, we'll circle back.
That's fine. You can do.
When you said race, I had to jump in.
Right, exactly. That's true. I should clarify that, right?
As they're running.
So yeah, I have I come from a fencing background, so it's a sport that basically, if you imagine it, everyone looks like me. It's a educated, ultra high-end sport that's notorious for private schools, lots of money, the wealthy, the elite. And I came into it fitting the mold essentially of the way that the people looked in there, and I joined the community, and it was easy for me. So there was lots of people who looked like me, and one of the people that I turned to was an athlete who was a 2004 Olympian called Jed Dupree. He's the guy that I always label as a key factor in my life, because even though I fit the mold and looked like it, I actually didn't have a lot of money. I grew up in Brooklyn. My family moved to New York from Atlanta, Georgia. We didn't have enough money to send me to competitions, to go to travel with my parents. So the person who actually funded me, not only to like coach me for free, but to take me to competitions alone when I was young, about 16, overseas, that got me to my first world championships, was my coach and his father. They funded me, they paid for me, and they also challenged me to open myself up to a world inside sport that I don't think I would have ever been witness to. So the things that I always label like that Jed did for me, other than fund me and coach me and give me his heart and teach me, is the things that we did outside of it. Jed had a foundation called the Touching Lives Foundation, and it was a very small group just for our fencing club, where it funded kids who didn't have enough money to come fence at the club. I was the first member of that. And in turn, being a part of that program, what I had to do was to give back, and I had to go to Harlem to teach classes, to get more people to come down and mentor them to be members of the Touching Lives Foundation. We supported kids from a range of age groups, but all from the inner city. And having those kids come in and feeling the connection with them and watching them enjoy something that they would have never enjoyed, the way that I was enjoying something that I would have never been able to do. There was no way for my family to get me to the level to make an Olympic team, to be funded. So this man opened me up to that, and he gave me a belief in myself that has never changed, which is that if you want something, there's always a route. And I think that Ali did that for a lot of people too. I mean, being a man who spoke up in such a dramatic fashion, there was a lot of people that maybe didn't believe in themselves, but hearing someone speak up for them who looked like them, like Jed was the person who did that for me and told me I could do it, challenged me, made me come into school. I ended up seeing him a lot more than I saw my own parents, kept me out of trouble, busted my ass when I was late, kept me from, punished me when I was doing things wrong. And he was the man in my life for a long time that I had such respect for, that the lessons that he taught me stuck with me forever. The books he gave me, the quotes he gave me, the things that he passed on to me are things that hit so heavy. And I think that's what the difference between a mentorship where, whether you have parents or people that are around you all the time, coming from someone that you have a respect for, that you're working towards in athletics, that's such a special bond. And, it's a pleasure for me to even just come on here and say thank you. I also want to just, say thank you for being here. I feel honored to be on this with everybody who's on here. It's an amazing opportunity, and to be somewhere that's hosted by one of my favorite all-time athletes, surrounded by athletes that I greatly admire is amazing. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, and Ibtihaj, I mean, I think in the vein of fencing, you heard Race talk about the circumstances by which fencing generally is accessible. And so what was your experience through mentorship to be able to navigate such a sort of an exclusive arena and just rise to this level of prominence?
Well, I want to start off by saying thanks for having me. Matt, it's good to see you. When I think about my career, my life as an athlete, my life as an African American, I feel that my parents did such an amazing job in putting my ancestors in front of me. Muhammad Ali was just a really big part of, I think, my life and the way that I envision myself, especially as an athlete, even if that happens subconsciously. And in college I had, and I don't know if I've ever told Dr. John Carlos this, but I had his poster, his very famous image on my wall on my dorm room wall in college. And even though he's a friend now, I just want to tell him that he's meant so much to me in my career, and how I move forward and operate as an activist and as an agent of change. My sport, fencing, yes, is predominantly white, and to exist in that space, not just as a woman of color, but also as a visibly Muslim woman, I think is an act of resistance. And to do so in this space, I think, and to exist even as a professional athlete and receive so much pushback, I wouldn't have been able, I think, to persevere and face these obstacles had it not been for mentorship. Peter Westbrook, who some of the people on the call may know, is a 6-time Olympian, 13-time national champion, and a bronze medalist in the Seoul Games in '88. But to me, I think the most important thing that he's done in his life and his career is start the Peter Westbrook Foundation, which was founded about 30 years ago and was meant to provide access for communities of color, underserved, underrepresented communities to find their footing in fencing. I was told about the Peter Westbrook Foundation at 16 years old. Someone literally approached me at a competition and said, hey, they're Black people who fence. And to be acknowledged for being different constantly as a kid is super taxing. But I remember Googling the Peter Westbrook Foundation in that moment, because I was like, man, there are people who look like me who fence, and I had to see it for myself. So my parents took me to New York. I'm from New Jersey, took me to New York, and to see, 200 kids who look like me, fencing, people who had been on Olympic teams, world championship teams, who had traveled the world as people of color, as Black people. It was a world of fencing that I didn't know existed. I saw fencing as a means to go to a good college. I had no idea that there was this world outside of collegiate fencing that existed. And without having Peter found, I guess, this foundation and provide access for communities of color, for people like me to see ourselves in sport and to honestly fund our journey through sport. You know, without having the foundation, I wouldn't have been able to travel the world. I wouldn't have understood that no matter the things that I hear from national coaches, from teammates, the pushback that I receive, I think that challenge your very existence. Without having someone like Peter in my life to tell me that everything meant for me will never miss me, and that God has a plan for me, and I have to persevere, not only for myself, but for all the young Black girls that come after me, for all the Muslim kids who come after me, I think was really pivotal. And I want to thank Peter for his foundation. I want to thank all the Peters out there for giving kids like me the opportunity to exist in our sport and be like acts of resistance in our own lives through the vehicle of sport. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, an honor for all of us. And so, yeah, and so within that, we hear this power of mentorship through a lot of different sources. Some within self-motivation, Muhammad Ali, figures we may not even met. But sometimes it's direct with the coaching level or the inspiration to just have that self-awareness to shift things. So I want to turn to Lex and then go to Gwen. So Lex, what's your story along that person? You know, and we're thinking more outside of our family that really inspired you as a mentor to continue to persevere and achieve these great things. And I want to make a note, your team, what's called the West Coast Dogs, beat ball champs. I appreciate that because that means you're into baseball. But yeah, Lex, I'd love to hear more about that story.
For sure. And just to echo everyone else's sentiments, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and offer my thoughts surrounding mentorship. But there's been so many people in my life, and I hate to just name one person, but Barbara Sherman has been a really huge pillar and person in my life. And Ms. Sherman acted as a transition counselor for me when I was growing up. And I lost my sight when I was 8 years old, but I started having complications, before then. And she's been around ever since I was 3 years old to this day. And, through Head Start, helping me get through Head Start and helping me transition successfully through elementary school and middle school and high school, and helping me transition from the school setting into the community, job placement, adult placement, and ultimately helping me see that I belonged in this community and in the world just as much as the next person. And I can totally remember times of even her opening the doors to her home. She's married, has a son, and her husband, one time I was involved in Boy Scouts. And so her husband had helped me make my car for, I can't remember what the Derby is called, but the Boy Scouts, you race your car. And, I can remember him, helping me with like holding the saw in my hand and directing my hands in a way where it was shaping and making the car, and we put the wheels on it and we painted it. And just that whole experience was amazing. And so as a person with a disability, from a medical standpoint, you can't argue with the fact that like I'm blind, I can't see anything. But when you think about it from a social standpoint, I am disabled because of how society is set up and how it's organized. So if I show up to school bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to learn, and I don't have books in Braille, or I don't have a computer with a screen reader installed on it, then I can't learn like the next student can, because I don't have the accommodations that I need. If I am interviewing for a job and I'm the best candidate, and the job goes with the employer goes with the next person, it could be very well because they don't want to spend additional dollars on special training or again the necessary equipment that I would need to do that job appropriately, effectively, efficiently. And Mrs. Sherman helped me see that I can break down those barriers, and she gave me that internal just power and empowerment, and let me know that you can go out here and there is something for you. And so of course it has led to sports, and I've been able to do a lot within that realm. It is everything that she did and a host of others to help me see that, you know what, you belong here as well. And I just want to mention also too, when you think about Dr. Carlos, he mentioned how, put your hand up, put your fist up. And that is a scene that, I haven't had the luxury of being able to physically see that with my eyes. Never have. But as he spoke earlier, there was always something that I knew that you put your fist up and you put it up, like that has energy. Like you can feel that. And no matter the my personal experience, is still something that has resonated within my life. So kudos, Dr. Carlos. But Mrs. Sherman, amazing person, and she's helped establish a foundation for my life that I've been able to propel in and beyond athletics.
Powerful, Lex. And Lex, the mantra I read, no need for sight when you have a vision. And so Gwen, you've taken stands and you are now considering how this mentorship in your life is passing through. And so who was in your life outside of your family that sort of inspired you to take these stands? And I want to ask a follow-up so we can sort of lead into a next discussion about Rule 50, but I'd love to hear your story about who shaped that journey for you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a powerful panel here, and I appreciate the opportunity. I feel like, unfortunately, like Layla Ali said, I wasn't exposed to mentorship when I was growing up. I was born in the projects, like a lot of people. I lived in a house with 13 people. My granny worked a job. My father had me at 17 years old. We were poor. We were without. So I think I kind of fell into mentorship when I went to high school. My first mentor that I can remember that had the biggest impact on my life and is still a part of my life is my high school coach. His name is Philip Walbrink. And what I remember about him and what I know about him, he did things for nothing. He was a teacher. He was for himself, and he was white, but he coached at a predominantly Black school, high school. And, it wasn't the best high school in St. Louis. It had its reputation. But for some reason, when it came to athletes and when it came to his job, he took his job really seriously. And he gave us time. And he introduced all his athletes to different ideas, programs, what have you. He just introduced us to a different way of life and a different way of thinking, because all we knew was poverty. All we knew was the ghettos. All we knew was, once we get out of school, we'll just get a job. We won't, we'll work at a factory. Like, we were so subjected to just this average life. And he always pushed his athletes to want more and to think about more, to the fact where track and field was not even my first sport. I was a basketball player. So I only did track and field to stay in shape for basketball. So he was a track coach. And I remember it was so crazy. He literally wrote letters to every college every college for all of his athletes. I didn't even know what a college application was, a college letter, an admission, nothing. He did that for all of his athletes. And honestly, that's the only reason why I went to college. The only reason. You know, he just took his time out for us. And I just feel like because he was so unselfish in that nature, it really opened my eyes to see that, you know, I feel like mentorship is giving without getting anything back. I feel like mentorship is just giving someone your time, and just being sincere in that moment and exposing children or adults or anybody to something that they've never thought they could be exposed to in their lifetime. And that's why he was so important to me. We talk all the time, and I feel like he had the first biggest impact in my life. Like Lex said, I have a lot of mentors, but I think he was the first one I was exposed to in high school.
Yeah, and you know, you think about that line, that, you know, the through line of these experiences, and now we're looking forward, trying to figure out, where do we go from here? You know, what are the next steps? We're confronted with a moment, quite a few moments, and so I want to pose to, you know, and I know this is a challenging subject, but Rule 50. This is something specific to Olympians. You know, I just had a panel talking to professional athletes, and sure, there's internal things in different leagues, but this is a clear-cut regulation around protest, where and when and how in the Olympic circles. And they have, you know, a significant list of reasoning. And so I want to read something really quick that the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee's Athlete Advisory Committee just recently commented on, saying, Carlos and Smith risked everything to stand for human rights and what they believed in, and they continue to inspire generation after generation to do the same. It is time for the Olympic and Paralympic movement to honor their bravery rather than to not denounce their actions. But we know this is a challenging space. I just wanted to kind of go around the room briefly of how do you reconcile this important moment and these important conversations and actions? We see the inspiration. Lex expresses, I didn't need to even see the image to feel the power. And we see how much that transcends and changes our circumstances. So what do you think can be done to find that balance between what the Olympic Committee is seeking in the sort of public domain between the lines, and trying to find ways to use a platform, as you all have done, to shape the future? And I'll start with you, Gwen, since you had your moment with the Pan Am Games.
Right. I do feel like in terms of the Olympic Committee, I think they need to do away with the rule, just because, like Dr. John Carlos said, it goes against our human rights of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. They literally take away all of our rights and everything that we stand for and everything that has shaped us to even get to the Olympic Games when they take away, you know, that moment for us on any platform or the field of play. The rule is not subjected to just the podium. It's subjected to the field of play and to the village. So you have no right to speak while you're there. As soon as you hop off the plane, you don't have a right to speak. They take that away. So I feel like it just speaks to the power of, you know, people's voices. Like, what people say, it does shape the world. You look at Muhammad Ali, everything that he said, he really didn't have to be the best athlete in the world. You know, that helped. You know, that put him on the platform, that put him on the pedestal. But his words, just his words, shaped and molded generations upon generations of activism. And, you know, I just feel like when you take away somebody's words, you try to take away their power. And for that reason alone, the rule has to change. We cannot have this rule in place. If we want to speak out on things that we need to speak out on, we need to use our platform, our sacrifices, our 4 years or 8 years we've dug in the dirt to make this team, and say what needs to be said. That's just my personal opinion. It's
No,
as simple as that.
no, I appreciate that, Gwen, and you've demonstrated it. And I know you've opened up significant conversations. And race, for example, you took a stand at Pan Am Games. So what do you think is the balance point with Rule 50 and moving forward?
I think that we've seen over and over again kind of the hypocrisy of the USOC and, you know, not only the USOC, but everything that's going on in our country right now. We were on probation at the same time John Carlos and Tommy Smith were elected in the Hall of Fame. So they were literally acting in a different way than they were celebrating. I was at the White House when John Carlos and Tommy Smith after 2016 came and were acknowledged by Barack Obama. Powerful moments that represent so much, but so little happens afterwards. I think it's time that we, you know, especially right now, I took a knee as a white man. I took a knee as a guy talking to the idea that you can stick up and speak up for other people, for issues and injustices that you speak, you know, the issues that I labeled gun violence, the immigration policies, our president, and also racism. It's a no-brainer for me just on a simple platform. My platform is when this went down, you know, I immediately called Gwen, we connected, and I got behind whatever Gwen was going to say, because the truth of the matter is that the people that are being silenced by Rule 50 are Black people. They're not people who look like me. They're not people who are my voice. They're the people whose voices are being not heard. And this is just another systematic, ruling that shuts that down. And for me, that's a no-brainer that can't be there anymore in this time, in this age, to have a place where athletes are not only, we're Olympic athletes, we're a very special breed of athlete. We're not at the Olympic Games making millions of dollars. If we get a medal, we go home with honor. We do our sport for love and for passion, and it's supposed to represent that, but you're taking away the love and passion that athletes have for their own communities, and that doesn't make any sense to me. So I agree, and I think Gwen has said it over and over again. It just doesn't make sense, and especially now in this climate, in this country, with this president, we can't be backing that kind of a sentiment up.
Yeah, and Ibtihaj, your perspective, we talked about your trailblazing path. How does that connect the dots to, say, Rule 50, and how have you navigated, and what do you think you can, what do you see going forward?
Well, I think it's a layered conversation, right? I don't think it's as simple as this one moment in time, right? When I look at Dr. John Carlos's career, for example, it wasn't just that one moment on, the podium. It's about the actions that preceded it and the actions that led after it, right? I don't think that who he is that moment. It's him being a champion of these efforts for his entire life. And as somebody who's African American, I feel like, I've been a part of this marathon my entire existence. I've been fighting for equality and for access for my entire life, especially as a person coming from a predominantly white sport. I know what discrimination looks like firsthand. And when I even look at the Olympic Games, and to Gwen's point about, the conversations that are had with athletes leading up to the games, at the games, what you can and what you can't say, my national governing body did an awful job preparing me as the visibly Muslim woman on Team USA to tackle hard questions about our current administration, the bigoted things that were being said. And this is still during a time where it wasn't okay to say that the leader of the free world is a racist, right? Remember, Jemele Hill lost her job for saying that. So this was during a time where it was not okay to say. It still was, kind of on shaky ground to even explicitly say that we live in a bigoted America. So to have to tackle these really difficult questions, it wasn't a matter of, keeping it, PC and, kind of shying away from speaking things as they are. I felt like this was my opportunity to speak up for my communities, to lend my voice, to change the narrative. And I think because of my predecessors, because of Dr. John Carlos, because of Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, because of Muhammad Ali, I had the courage to say what I said. And I'll never shy away from that. I don't think that a rule prevents me from speaking my truth. And it doesn't have to be in the public eye. It can be within my space of sport. It can be within my space of, and between my followers on social media, or even in op-ed pieces in Time Magazine or New York Times or wherever it is. I feel like I'm able to use and extend my platform to be an agent of change. That's what I'll do. And I think that we all see what that looks like from Muhammad Ali. He never cared what, the repercussions of his actions were, because it always centered around humanity and what he could do to change the way that we disproportionately treat communities of color and impoverished communities. And I think that that is something that we all should stand behind. It's not about us in one moment on the podium. It's not about a medal. It's about humanity.
Yeah, and Lex, you've expressed a lot. You've definitely charted your own course in so many different respects, and you've shared your mentorship. What do you think the next steps could be or should be within the Olympic family, the Paralympic family, in addressing speaking out, Rule 50, the parameters by which that is guided?
Yeah, well, I think that everyone has certainly made some really great points, and Ibtihaj makes a really great point as well. I think that is certainly a marathon of sorts. It's going to need to, it takes time, and we're going to need to continue to speak out on these things. I know that, I would personally like to see that this narrative of athletes, quote unquote, not being able to, athletes shouldn't be able to speak out on social issues. Like, we do amazing things. We push the limits physically and mentally. But the reality is we are human beings. When we go home, we have families, we have jobs, we live in communities, and we have social interests that are important to us. And if we make it to I'm sorry, before I get to that point, we have all of those things, and that alone, we should be able to speak out on those things to improve the lives for our own sake, and for those who we love, and for those who look like us and live a similar type of life or struggle, whatever it is. And then I think that, sorry, I blanked on my next point. But for those who are blessed with the opportunity to get to an Olympic Games or Paralympic Games, I think that it is a really good thing for us to be able to reverberate the concerns and voice that comes from the people who cry out for help. Like, it's an issue specifically when we talk about social injustice, police brutality, systematic oppression. I mean, those are issues that are present. They've been alive, and they continue to live right now. And I think that when we have these opportunities where we can speak out on that, then I believe that we should, because that is a once in a lifetime opportunity. You may not get that again. And there's a lot of people back at home from our communities and neighborhoods where they're crying out daily for help and no one hears them. So if we have the ability to do it and help, then I certainly think that it should be done, and should be done without any type of obstacles put in our path.
And Dr. Moses, I want to go and then kind of close with Dr. Carlos. But Dr. Moses, having that perspective through so much time, and then you see it sort of lands on Rule 50. What do you think the most productive way forward is in addressing that? And you're on mute, so there you go. Thanks.
Okay. I was listening to Lex and Race and Gwen and Iptija talk about their experiences and how they feel about it. You can only imagine how I felt at 13 years old during times that were almost parallel to what we have now, minus a COVID virus. The atmosphere was still the same in terms of in terms of how Black people were being treated. And we didn't have a lot of options other than hit the streets back then, but I was too young. I was much too young. But it was a very powerful moment. And I'm glad to really hear from the athletes that are younger than me, because that's really the piece of the picture that I haven't had a chance to really hear for myself. I've been asked probably since Christmas, I would say a dozen times by people who are IOC members, journalists, very high level people. In fact, I had a conversation last week in terms of what did I think was going to happen. And I wrote an article about it. I think it was in the Guardian, probably January or February, in the Guardian in London. And they asked me about that. And I mentioned that it's going to be very difficult to control. When I went to the Olympics in '76, it really wasn't that long after John and Tommy put their fist in the air in 1968. The Africans had boycotted the Olympic Games in 1976 because New Zealand, the rugby team, played a match against South Africa, and the African countries boycotted. So that was in the air in '76. I know how I felt knowing that my African brothers couldn't come to the Olympics. I know how I felt as an Olympic champion, especially when they pulled the flag up. I was kind of in a no man's zone, being a active junior at Morehouse College and understanding a lot more about our culture, seeing and meeting Tommy and John at the Olympic Games personally in '76, and then going on to be friends with them later. But my comment to one IOC member was that if you're going to try to restrict an athlete from experiencing and transmitting that experience to the world in terms of how they feel about their particular situation, especially within the scope of everything that's going on right now, then I think it's going to be very hard to control and very difficult. I know how I felt in '76 when I got on the victory stand, coming from a school with no track, no field. I had to jump fences. I felt that I know I was discriminated against by the newspapers and had just a terrible time getting to the track. So I was just focused on winning the gold, and I knew I was going to break the record, which I did in the Olympic Games. And when I did that, I felt like I had accomplished what John and Tommy had accomplished in '68 just by being there and getting on that gold medal. Because I was a puny little kid at 12, 13 years old. I would have never thought that 8 years later, I would be on that podium doing that. The IOC started in 1894 as an organization of aristocratic white men from Europe. I think there had been a transition, particularly in the '80s when Juan Antonio Samaranch came into play. He nominated me personally to be the first IOC Athletes Commission member from the United States. And one of the things that he told me, he said, I don't want you to represent the United States. I don't want you to represent the U.S. Olympic Committee, neither your country nor your Olympic Committee. I want to hear from you personally. I want your personal advice on issues like drug testing, athletes' rights, whether athletes are going to get paid, all these different things. So he was a little bit different. And he actually fought to bring the Olympic Committee back together in 1980 and in 1984. The Russians boycotted in 1984. We boycotted in 1980. And being a diplomat, he had that skill. And I think from my experience with him, he understood that the athletes needed to talk and the athletes needed to express themselves. And now I think we've seen a total reversion from the IOC, in my personal opinion, from that attitude. There was a lot of world issues back then, terrorism in Europe, there was all kinds of things going on in Africa. There were a lot greater issues, but now it's different. And I like what Ray said, where boycotts now, in his opinion, are really oriented toward people of color. But this conversation I had last week, I proposed the fact that boycotts and exhibitions of solidarity could come in any form. It could be someone from Denmark who's angry because they're drilling oil off of the north coast of Africa. It could be someone in Zimbabwe who's angry because, you know, one of the sports people they think is being corrupt and taking bribes. It can be someone who's against corruption, against what's happening in track and field. It could be anything. It's definitely going to be about how people of color are being treated around the world, whether it's Brazil, London, in France, Caribbean, wherever. I just think that at this time, what I posed to this person was that perhaps the IOC should be a leader in this area, and instead of trying to suppress the way people feel and expression, it's going to come out. It's bound to come out one way or the other. Maybe they could be a champion for human rights and people being free to express themselves under these conditions. I mean, it's not like everyone's going to church to compete. You know, this is a situation where people have put their lives on the line, literally in certain parts of the world, just to be able to train, or because of the politics in their country. So I just think that they could be a leader, and people would watch the Olympic Games to see, you know, what kind of representation people are going to have from different parts of the world. I think they're just looking at it from a very negative view. And the article that I wrote, I said, there's no way you're going to be able to contain it. If I was there and was able to do it again, however I felt, I would go up on that podium in my mind with, I don't know if I'm ever going to get here again, but this is what I'm going to do right now. That's really.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ibitaj.
I think that Edwin brings up a really good point in, like, us as athletes holding, like, the IOC, but also the USOPC accountable. And when the USOPC issued their statement about the movement of Black lives, we as athletes felt like they fell short, particularly as Black athletes, to have so many of us exist and compete for the United States and have our organization fall short in that moment was super hurtful. And like Athletes for Impact, which is a nonprofit that Matt knows, Dr. John Carlos and I are co-founders of, we forced the hand of the USOPC and demanded that they reissue a statement that explicitly states that Black Lives Matter. And I think that in forcing our NGBs, the organizations that we represent, to acknowledge, you know, this moment and how pivotal I think it is in hopefully changing the trajectory of our country and really creating a future rooted in equality and justice, I think starts with them. And even if it's not a rule change today, I think them acknowledging us and seeing us as a step in the right direction, even if that comes from us forcing them to do so.
And Dr. Carlos, I'd love to get your insight to tie us all together. I mean, the inspiration even of these comments have stemmed from this moment in 1968. What do you think the way forward can be with Rule 50 and other ways of being able to voice these concerns we have for our country and the world in terms of inequity and many other injustices. Dr. Carls, just need that unmute real quick to hear that beautiful commentary. Thank you.
Hey, I was saying, I'd like to start by saying ditto to everything that has been said by the young athletes out there. I'd like to keep it simple and say, first of all, it's a human right to be concerned about humanity, specifically when it imposes upon your life, imposes upon your environment, imposes upon your history, imposes upon your future. For you to go and train, let's say 3/4 of the year to represent the United States, because in essence, that's who you represent. You represent America before you represent yourself, before you represent your family, your kids. So therefore you say to yourself, while I'm on this podium for my 15 minutes in the sun, maybe I should have a concern about the lack of education my kids and their peers have because they wasn't able to go to the various universities, because they wasn't able to pay the $500,000 that the white parents paid to get their daughters into USC. We have a concern about systemic racism. And when you think about systemic racism, you think about the year that Edwin Moses said that the Olympic movement started. They started with no representation of people of color back in the 1800s. We still today have no representation. There's painted people there that look like me, but they don't think like me. They don't have the aggressiveness to go to a meeting and say, hey, wait a second, we have a United States Olympic team that's taking place, and we have artifacts that we present to our Olympians, but we don't have anything relative to people of color. We didn't have anything but suntan lotion to give them, like we didn't need suntan lotion. The combs that they used for white people's hair was fine. We was happy that they got theirs, but what did they have for people of color? No representation whatsoever. And then when you sit back and you say, I should have a gag or a sock stuck in my mouth because I choose to bring these things about and make them realize that the leader at the helm might have changed, but the ideals of the helm has not changed. When we sit back and think about the equality that we have amongst the various athletes of all walks of life that say we want to uphold the ideals of the Olympic movement, and then realize that the Olympic movement doesn't want to uphold its own ideals. It's hypocritical. It's hypocritical to send a letter out and say we acknowledge the wrongdoings of Tommy Smith, Peter Norman, and John Carlos, and then want to denounce Gwen and the fencer, the young fencer, to denounce who they are and what they stand for, and tell them this is not the place to bring it about. Well, where is the place? The object of a demonstration is for the world to see it, not for it to be hidden in the dark and the shadow in the back. It's supposed to be pronounced out front. So everyone, such as the young fella there that has a problem with his eyes, he can hear so much just through turning up the volume by a silent act of raising your fist. He can't see me raise my fist, but he can hear through his ears. He can see through his ears in terms of what is taking place, to encourage him to step up for what you need in school. There's many individuals that was before him that never even had the courage or the audacity to think that they can step up for themselves and say, I'm a blind individual and I need this in order for me to matriculate and be as good or as great as God intended for me to be. No one has the right. The Olympic Committee or anyone else has the right to tell you that you don't have the right to exist and be concerned not merely for yourself, but for your peers, for your kids' peers, that they will have a better opportunity than your father or your grandfather had. It's time for the Olympic Committee to step up, the International Olympic Committee in particular, because they are the umbrella of the world. And when I say systemic racism, we think about the greatest athletes in the world, a lot of them was of color, whether it was on the North American continent or South American continent or the continent of Africa. We have never had the Olympic Games even in a discussion about being hosted in the nation of Africa. Why is that? We've gone to Japan, we've gone to Mexico, but we've been in all the white European countries all the time. We have these games. It's time that they start looking in terms of saying, let's do something to develop the countries that really give the greatest inputs to the Olympic movement. And I'll leave it like that, man. It's time for the United States and the International Olympic Committee to get up off their fannies and start to make the necessary change before the building fall in on them. As it stands right now, there's a tug of war with the Olympic Committee and Russia. Russia is talking about right now, they want to create another semi-Olympic committee. They need to do something if they anticipate holding the building together, because the walls are starting to cave in. And when they lose the athletes, the trust of the athletes, and the athletes feel that they've been used, then they're going to really see how devastating they have been to themselves. Thank you for
powerful,
the time.
Dr. Carlos. Yeah.
Thank you for the time.
Goodness, thank you for yours. To everybody here today, I know we have kept you over, especially to our athletes that gave of their time today. Thank you so much. There have been some amazing questions coming in from the audience that I know we don't have time for today. Perhaps what we'll do is get those to you in writing, and anyone who's interested in weighing in and sharing, we can share it with our attendees after the fact. But Lex, there was a powerful question to you about what we need to do as a nation to diversify our Paralympic athletes, where our Olympic athletes in many ways really represent the diversity of the United States, and we haven't yet achieved that in the Paralympic Games, and what steps we should be taking to do that. We've had other questions coming in regards to wanting to hear stories about what you have learned from your mentees, and not just having this be a one-directional kind of transformation of knowledge, but instead the idea that it really is bi-directional, and we learn so much from those that we had the opportunity to mentor in our lives. That's just a couple of the amazing questions that I've seen come in, but we will make sure to get those to you for anyone who wants to weigh in and get a chance to answer those, and we'll get that out in writing to everybody. I want to also call out Dr. Labchik, who is here as an audience member today. He is someone who has been a mentor to so many of us in this work. He is down in Florida, but somebody who has really been a force for sports and activism throughout his life. And also just encouraging everyone to join us tomorrow. We, from 8:30 till 5:30 Eastern tomorrow, have different sessions led by leaders in the sport for development field talking about the power of mentorship and activism. There are amazing sessions every hour throughout the day. So please do join us again. Without anything further from me, on behalf of Mentor, on behalf of the Ali Center, just thank you to everyone who chose to join us today with your time. And a special thank you to each of the athletes who shared their wisdom with us today. Doug, I will pass to you for the final word.
Oh,
Can I
thank you.
Can I say one thing real quick?
Of course.
I'd like to say on behalf of Muhammad Ali and our career, when Ali was a young man and I was a younger man, we kind of merged together because we kind of reflected off of one another. And I think the greatest thing that we had in terms of satisfaction was that we can come together. He lived in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I lived in Willingboro, New Jersey, which was about 30 minutes from one another. And we made a bond that what we would do, we would go to the various schools, whether it was a high school or a junior high school, and we would go in and we would sneak like, man, I was driving down the street and I saw this guy standing on the side, looked like he was in need. And I looked at him, he looked for me, so I turned my car around and he told me his car broke down. He needs a ride. I said, man, I got to go to the school. Would you come with me, man? When I get done, I'll take you where you need to go. And I go to the audience and say to the audience, say, guys, I got this guy here. I brought him with me, and I think I know him, but I can't remember who he is. Hey, man, would you come out here? If anybody know, let me know. Come on out here, man. And he would walk on the stage. Now, everyone in the audience would freeze right away because they can't believe that Muhammad Ali walked out there. But we had the attention of the audience. We had the attention of the administration of the school or anyone from the district officers. We had the attention to inspire a whole auditorium of kids. So my essence, what I'm trying to say is maybe sometimes our athletes should get together, merge together, and go to the school, like 2 or 3 of them together, and really gravitate those kids and push them to the highest level.
Thank you, Dr. Cross. And as you know, so much of this day, although we're referencing Muhammad Ali, so much of it in the inspiration has flowed through you and your moment. And of course, as Ibtihaj said, we know that that moment was not isolated onto one podium, and it's a legacy. And it's as Matt mentioned, it goes different directions. I teach a course at UConn, and I learn just as much from my students as I'm teaching. And that reciprocation is so important. So we're exploring how we can move forward. And I guess I'm gonna, can I call you Ipti? Because I know I heard your coach mention. I'm gonna quote you on this. He said, "Lead each day with love." And I think that's sometimes hard for people to grasp at times because there is a frustration, but at the center of it, when there's this love for humanity and knowing that we're trying to elevate through each other in this mentorship. And as we've heard through these stories, the dynamics of it, you don't have to look exactly the same. It could come from different groups of people. Allies come in many shapes and forms because we are centering on our humanity. So I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing it with us. It's been highly educational, highly inspirational. And I encourage us all to keep in touch and support each other through this. This is a trying time on many different levels, but we want to pick each other up and move together through this love.
Absolutely. And we see that Eli has graced us on screen. He's someone who behind the scenes put all of this together, and just really want to shout out his vision of really this entire 2-day conference and everything that was done. So Eli, thank you for that and your leadership.
It was amazing. It was just so inspirational and powerful and incredible today. So thank you all. Just amazing.
Love it. Well, everyone enjoy your night. Rest up. Long day tomorrow together. And just so excited to continue to learn from such amazing voices. I appreciate each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Be safe.
Thank you.